Time now for a check of the top business news stories. Kate Moody is here. Hi there, Kate.
Hi, Tom.
Let us begin in the United Kingdom because the unemployment rate has edged to its highest level in 2 years, and there are warnings that it could even double by the end of the year.
Yeah, nearly 700,000 jobs have been cut since March, despite the government-sponsored furlough program, which supported nearly 10 million people at its height. Now, the government insists it will wind up that support by the end of October, amid warnings of significant job cuts in the months to come. Luke Schrago reports.
When the coronavirus pandemic began, the UK government acted, introducing the job retention scheme that saw it pay most of the salaries of workers furloughed, keeping millions from redundancy. But it was never going to last forever.
We know that the furlough scheme unwinds in October, but we've also seen people moving off the furlough scheme and going back into work, obviously as schools return and people going back into offices. So this is positive, but we do know we're going to have a bumpy few months ahead.
Reopening the economy over previous months saw those on furlough fall from 30% of the workforce to 13%. But unemployment in the 3-month period to July edged up to 4.1%, a sign of nervousness from cash-strapped firms laying off workers ahead of the end of the furlough programme. With 36,000 people falling off the payrolls of private companies in August, unions were warning of a tsunami of job cuts directly linked to the end of the scheme. It's left both economists and politicians on both sides of the UK's political divide calling for new support measures, especially as the pandemic rumbles on.
It makes no sense at all for the government to pull support away now in one fell swoop. I'm calling on the government to work with us to create new targeted support that can replace the job retention scheme, to develop through this a scheme for those sectors that most need it.
It's thought the job retention scheme will cost the UK government €58.7 billion by the end of its duration. The question for the government, though, is what higher unemployment could cost it, with the Bank of England predicting joblessness to nearly double by the end of the year.
Let's check in on the day's trading action now. Wall Street pared back some of its earlier stronger gains. The Dow Jones finishing just above the flat line. The tech sector and the Nasdaq outperforming there, up about 1.2% at the close. The U.S. Federal Reserve has kicked off its 2-day policy meeting, and investors will be focused on any announcements or guidance which could come out on Wednesday. The major European indices closed slightly higher. We saw London's FTSE 100 leading with gains of over 1% there. A major survey in Germany, meanwhile, showed a significant increase in investor sentiment there in September. The World Trade Organization has ruled that American tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods are illegal. The non-binding decision by a WTO panel is largely symbolic, but it's the first that directly addresses that tit-for-tat trade war, which has erupted between the world's two largest economies since 2018. The U.S. Trade Representative said the ruling underscored its argument that the WTO is not fit for purpose, while China's Commerce Ministry described it as fair and objective. Separately, the Trump administration has announced it will remove its 10% tariff on Canadian aluminum as long as imports remain stable in the coming months. Canada confirming that it'll drop its threat of counter tariffs in return. Moving on to some of the day's other business headlines now. Apple has unveiled a new iPad, a discount version of its smartwatch, and a new subscription that bundles its TV, music, and news offerings. The tech giant is leaning more on its services rather than hardware. The digital event didn't mention a hotly anticipated new iPhone, which analysts now expect next month due to disruption in production caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Airbus has warned it's likely to resort to compulsory layoffs in France, in addition to the voluntary departures already outlined earlier this year. In a letter to staff, the planemaker's CEO said air traffic was not recovering at the level the industry had been counting on. And Citigroup will push ahead with more job cuts as early as this week. The U.S. lender had paused all layoffs as the pandemic hit, but is set to resume its cost-cutting efforts. Separately, reports suggest U.S. regulators are preparing to formally reprimand the bank for failing to improve its risk management systems. Finally, Lego will phase out single-use plastic and switch to paper packaging as part of its sustainability initiative. The toy company has yet to find a realistic alternative for its blocks, which currently require 90,000 metric tons of plastic every year. Lego saw a 7% jump in sales during the first 6 months of this year as families around the world faced lockdown orders. Lego says it's been receiving letters from its young fans encouraging it to think more about the environment, Tom.
Okay, so paper bags, but plastic blocks in the paper bags.
For now, anyway.
For now, all right.
Until the next generation comes up with something better.
Well, a little step in the right direction. Thank you very much indeed, Kate Moody there with the business news.